What's up? So I wanted to make this video talking about what I think the impact of AI is going to be on future generations, mainly in the educational and professional sense. So to give some context, my background, I started college in 2022 and graduated earlier this year. And so I kind of was in this intermediate and transitionary phase where I didn't have AI for the first 2 years of my college experience, and then it was a relevant factor for the last 2 years. And when I say I didn't have AI, I don't mean that it wasn't available at all. What I mean is that most people were either unaware of it or it wasn't powerful enough to really be a useful tool. And so I consider myself lucky in that I managed to go through the foundational years of my college experience. I did my core curriculum without AI as a tool or a resource which I was able to access in any meaningful way. So I was forced to actually, use the old noggin and actually think through problems and make connections and reason through things and struggle through the process of learning on my own. And the only resources that I had available to me were really the same resources that people have had available to them for the last 10 years. I had YouTube, I had various math forums, I had, general online resources. But outside of that, there was no quick and easy way to get answers other than trying to pattern match the problem you were working on to an existing problem you could find on the internet, or actually, manning up and going in person to your professor's office hours or your TA's office hours and saying, hey, I'm stuck, can I get some help? And I consider myself incredibly lucky that I was born when I was and I went to school, and by school I mean university, when I did, because it afforded me the opportunity to build these foundational skills and learn these foundational topics without the use of AI the hard way. But then later on, many of the things that I did in my junior and senior year were greatly aided by the fact that I could use AI to accelerate the rate at which I learned things and the rate at which I built things. All of that is to say, though, I think that offers me a unique perspective into how AI is influencing how the future generation develops and learns. And frankly, it's pretty blackpilling if I'm honest. I mean, so let me give an example. So I helped teach a Calculus 1 class while I was an undergraduate, and I would help to, instruct these kids. I'd essentially lead like review sessions to help them stay on top of the material and prepare for tests and things like that. And what I noticed, and maybe this has always been the case and it was only made apparent to me because I was in a position to notice it, but I'm not convinced of that. What I noticed was that a lot of kids coming in had serious gaps in their fundamentals. And so some of them didn't know how to factor polynomials, some of them didn't really know anything about trigonometry, and these are students in a Calculus 1 class, mind you. Some of these students didn't even really know how to work with fractions and exponents. And these are kids who are declaring their major as, chemical engineering, aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, and they can't do basic mathematical manipulations. That was the first red flag to me that things were wrong. But I think in the years following COVID, a lot of people were inclined to blame kids being behind on the fact that COVID disrupted their education during some of their formative years in like middle school or high school. And I understand that argument, but now I think we're past the point where the disruption that COVID introduced has kind of gone and settled, and what we're seeing now is a more persistent problem with the younger generation of people who are just now entering university and higher education being severely unprepared. And I think a lot of that is because we've relaxed education standards, but I think right now we're starting to see the early stages of this lack of preparedness being accentuated by the fact that AI is now a tool that's largely available to anybody. I mean, you can get the free tier of ChatGPT and Claude, and for the purpose of doing your math homework, that's probably sufficient. You probably don't even need to pay for the $20 a month tier. And so it gravely concerns me that a lot of kids, for one reason or another, already have weak foundations, and now they have this tantalizing force of AI where it can do all of the busy work as far as your homework and things of that nature for you extremely easily. It will save you a lot of time, and there's a great incentive in terms of saving time and getting good grades on your homework to use it for that sort of thing. However, if you already have weak foundations, if you already do not understand math very thoroughly, and you're delegating a lot of the work that would be in service of improving your understanding and improving your foundations to AI, then you're really going to be stuck in whatever state you currently are in your mathematical aptitude, and it's not going to improve. And that's something that is really concerning to me. Is I think a lot of people are going to feel the need to crutch AI because their background is so weak that they don't see a way to complete their coursework at the university level otherwise. And maybe you should make the point that we should refocus on standardized tests, and that if you're in that weak of a position, you probably should not have been admitted to university in the first place, or rather you should be placed in some sort of remedial class. But this isn't a vanishingly small portion of students now. This is a large percent of students now. I think it was UC San Diego. Some crazy percentage of their incoming freshman class had to go through remedial math. And it wasn't just like remedial high school math. It was tracing back to concepts and things that should have been solidified and taught in middle school. And so we've got these two separate things which are contributing towards the same problem. The first of which is that math education is not rigorous. Education in general, K through 12, is not rigorous, and kids are coming in uniquely unprepared relative to any sort of historical precedent. And any chance they would have to sort of hunker down and say, okay, I had a bad start, but let me try to really learn this because it's going to be a core tool of whatever career it is I'm pursuing, the motivation to do so is greatly diluted by the fact that A, it's way easier to delegate the work to AI, and B, it's just way more convenient to say, hey, why would I spend 4 hours struggling through homework that I don't even understand when I can have the AI do it, and maybe I can lock in for the test, do just well enough to pass the class, and be on my way. This is greatly harming to the individual student because they're not going to learn, and generally in the pre-2020 era, the stock that people placed in a college education was that if you completed it, you showed a general level of determination and aptitude in whatever field it was that your degree was in, and so people could generally trust that you had a certain level of ability. I don't think anything about a college degree now guarantees that anymore. The standards have been relaxed, and AI has made just passing and getting through way more accessible to people that it otherwise would not be. And so these students are harming themselves in that they might make it through their degree program and they might even get good grades in that degree program, but when they eventually, hopefully, get employed, it's going to be very difficult for them because they don't actually have the skills that they needed to develop in order to be a reliable worker in whatever role it is that they're going to be seeking employment in. And so it's damaging to the individual because it stunts their growth, and ultimately what it does is it makes it hard for them to succeed in the career that their degree is setting them into. But on a broader scale, it's damaging to the society as a whole, where we have a whole cohort now of young people that are going to be greatly unprepared to take on these entry-level roles, which eventually will mature into mid-tier, and senior level roles. There's going to have to be some sort of passing of the torch between the older generation, the boomers and Gen X, and even the millennials, to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, to say, you guys are going to take on these technical roles, these engineering roles. You're going to have to maintain the infrastructure that's been built, and you're going to have to even expand upon it. And I feel like the pool of people which took their education seriously and are qualified to do so is increasingly small. We've decreased the standards, and AI has made it so that it's more accessible than ever for unqualified people who are not willing to work hard to get a credential, which previously would go a long way towards ensuring that you get one of these jobs in STEM. And so, we're already starting to see the effects of that now, where I think people's aptitude in things like coding and math is going down because they think they can delegate all of that thought process to AI. And I think if you take that trend and you extrapolate it 20 years into the future, it paints a very scary picture of what is our society going to look like when these very advanced, multifaceted, and technical apparati — is apparati the plural of apparatuses, whatever — when the older people who went through the more rigorous pipeline of education retire and they inevitably have to hand off the torch to people in my generation, are we going to have enough people who are qualified to maintain this critical infrastructure that our technology-driven society depends on? I don't know. And I'm speaking mainly on this topic from the perspective of somebody who has advanced knowledge in the field of mathematics and whose main area of expertise and just general the area where I have the most information and insight is mathematics. But really, this is a commentary on a trend that's extending across all sorts of technical domains. And I'm not sure what the solution is. I don't know how you disincentivize students from using AI when the way universities and their grading programs are structured really gives students every incentive to use AI and to not learn and to take the easy way out. And so I think we're headed for a very hectic time, and I don't know how we reconcile living in a society where we need a lot of very technically adept people to maintain a lot of the core infrastructure which we've come to kind of expect and take for granted, while simultaneously lowering our education standards and offering AI to everybody, which is in turn decreasing the overall aptitude of the new people who are entering the workforce and would otherwise be expected to, take the torch and carry forward this these various technical domains which they're meant to enter into. I'm not sure what the solution is, or if there is a solution. I think broadly what you can expect to see, starting really a couple years ago and becoming more apparent and being accentuated going forward, is a bifurcation point between two groups of people. There are going to be groups of people that are reliant on AI, and AI degenerates their abilities, and there's going to be groups of people who were competent before AI or were able to develop competence in something in spite of AI, and for them AI is going to be an accelerant. It's going to make them more productive. It's going to make them better at what it is they do. However, it's not going to be an even split. This bifurcation point is not going to be like a 50-50 split. It's probably going to be an 80-20 or a 90-10 split, where the former group is people who have had their abilities diminished by having access to AI, or their prospective abilities, have not been met and have been diminished because they had access to AI. And that 20 or 10% group of people is going to be those who were able to resist the tantalizing force of the easy results that AI can offer them, and were able to learn in spite of that, And because they develop those core skills in whatever field it is they're pursuing, they are now able to leverage AI maturely or ethically, for lack of a better term, and they're going to be able to do the work that it previously took a team of 3 or 4 people to do. But really, I think there's significant ramifications of what it is that I'm talking about. I think as the people in the 10 and 20% side of the bifurcation point become more efficient thanks to AI, and the people on the 80 and 90% side of that bifurcation point become more deficient thanks to AI, we're probably going to see a shrinking of the white-collar job force, and this is going to push down on the middle class, because there's going to be fewer jobs which can sustain a middle-class lifestyle. I can think about this further, and I'm sure there's many other first-order and second-order consequences which I can identify as a result of this. But overall, I just wanted to talk about this. I mean, I'm sure people, especially from my cohort, educational cohort, where you started school in 2021 to 2023, you have observed this with your younger peers, where I mean, some of them are kind of cooked, I'm not gonna lie, and I don't know how you uncook yourself, because the environment the environment doesn't lend itself towards people who are willing to take the hard route and learn things on their own, and probably have worse material outcomes in terms of grades, because they're not going to delegate all of their thinking to AI. I don't know what to tell the younger generation with regard to that. It sucks. I got lucky. Even then, I kind of got nicked by it at the end, because I graduated in a post-AI world, but I at least got lucky in that the first 2 years of my degree, it wasn't available to me. But yeah, this is just kind of a rambling video, but I wanted to put my thoughts out there about that. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you think I'm being too much of a doomer? Or do you think that the perspective that I'm offering is sadly indicative of where we're heading? Let me know, but y'all have a good one.